And just wanted to thank you all for joining us today. My name is Kelly Graves. I'm the director and co-founder of the Kellin Foundation, and we wanted to host this virtual celebration of children in recognition and honor of May as Children's Mental Health Month. Children's mental health matters all the time, especially, I would say, during this challenging time. And so we were planning to have this meeting in person, but obviously moving it to a virtual platform. So today we have a wonderful panel of great resources that I think are going to be particularly helpful to our to providers, to families, to individuals in many different facets of the community. We would ask if everyone can kind of mute your phones, and of course, if you would like to make a comment, we're going to be accepting questions in the chat box. So go ahead and type in your questions in the chat box as we go. And towards the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A session to address any questions that you may have. We will be recording this just so that we have the possibility to share the resources with other individuals. So if you are concerned about that, just want to let you know on the front end that we are going to record this for resource sharing for folks. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of a roadmap of how we're going to be moving forward. So we'll do a brief overview of the impact of kids and families and why we're all convening today. We'll give an overview snapshot of some of the national resources. A lot is coming out. I don't know if you all are feeling like that, but there's information overload in a lot of ways. So we're just going to highlight some of the national resources and then kind of filter down to the local resources too and take a snapshot of where we are with different local resource organizations and different pockets of the community, from education to homelessness to safety and security, and really kind of understanding what the resources are, because for children's mental health, that means not only focusing on their mental health, but their overall health and well-being. And that includes multiple of those pockets of resources. And the meat of our presentation today will be focused on our local leaders panel. So we'll have updates and specifically how to access resources at that time, and then we'll have some Q&A. So I pulled this quote in particular just to kind of highlight the fact that often the children lead us. This is a quote at the bottom from a high school student that says, "Surround yourself with people you trust, talk through what you're feeling, and stay involved with others. You can find that you have what it takes to make it through these challenging times." And I feel like these types of virtual meetings that we're having right now help us to take the advice of children and then also to connect ourselves so that we can be best equipped to help children and families. So thank you for joining us today. Very, very brief introduction on the Kellin Foundation as an organization. We're a nonprofit that's based in Greensboro, but now serves the triad-wide community. We build resilient children, families, and adults through behavioral health services, victim advocacy, and community outreach. To date, we're the only nationally recognized community-based behavioral health center in focusing on trauma and resiliency in the state of North Carolina, other than Duke University, who is the founder of the NCTSN approach in the country and worldwide. For more information about us, you can certainly visit our website. So why we're here: children's mental health matters. And that is the big push that across the country, the national organizations are pushing. And really the staggering statistics that many of us on the call may be familiar with, but the general population, perhaps not so much. So 1 in 5 kids has a mental illness. And a big focus of this year's campaign is to break the stigma around that and to really normalize that we all have mental health and mental illness on some sort of spectrum, to the point of, we have bad days. Anybody ever had a bad day? So we have bad days regularly, and our mental illness is not something that you either have or don't have. It's more kind of on a spectrum. So 1 in 5 have a diagnosable mental illness in our country. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth, and that has continuously increased. In past years, it was 4 and 3. And over the last 2 years, we've now seen that suicide is the second leading cause of death, followed only by accidents in the country. And even our youngest mental health and mental illness is not just for older youth, but also our youngers. So 1 in 6 children aged 2 to 8 years old have a mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. So we know that early intervention is going to be important, and that we need to first and foremost equip ourselves with the information of the prevalence of the issue so that we can then best know how to address it. Now, that being said, anybody feel like this during COVID? I feel like we have a lot of the resources that we need, but it feels sometimes like we're trying to figure out how to make things happen. And we're kind of riding backwards right now in terms of trying to know what direction to go in. And so this virtual call is largely to help to address that, to help us feel like we're going in the right direction, even during the challenging times, and to help us not only go through this together, but grow through this together and come out stronger than where we started. And so to get us warmed up and thinking about it in this way, put in the chat box, what do you see when you see this picture? And I promise you, this is not a Rorschach. This is not any kind of assessment. This is just to kind of get us warmed up. When you see this, what do you see? Throw it in the chat box so we can see. Lots of ducks, lots of ducks. Oh, I see some rabbits, a bird, rabbits, a duck and a rabbit. Lots of different things that you can see, right? All right. Hopefully, you can see at least a rabbit and a duck, maybe more. Challenge yourself to see both. Everyone see both? All right, what about this? Is this gentleman looking sideways or forwards? Interesting. I love these little videos. Tara says she can see both. Good stuff. Both. Yep, love it. What about this one? What do you see in this one? Two faces. Candlesticks. Lots of different things that people can see. People have said mountains in other settings, canals. And my personal favorite, how many legs does this elephant have? They start to run together sometimes, don't they? How many legs do we know an elephant has? We know an elephant typically has 4, but depending upon how you look at it, you might come up with a different answer. And oftentimes in our situations, our settings, our job roles, our parenting roles, sometimes we have to come up with one right answer. We have to put in one code. We have to put in one ID number. We have to kind of drill down to just one particular right answer. And so when we think about helping children and families, one of the biggest things that we need to think about is how do we use the best of what we know of what works in the process of helping them. And one of the nationally known approaches to that is to create trauma-informed approaches that help children and families through their situations. And that means being willing to shift your perspective to see what's not necessarily on the surface. And so those little pictures were kind of an example of that sometimes we have to challenge ourselves to see either the rabbit or the duck. Sometimes we're automated to see just the immediate what's on the surface. And we have to challenge ourselves to kind of look at things in different perspectives and to be able to see things in different ways beyond the surface. And right now, I don't know about you all, but children's behaviors certainly are much more than what's on the surface. We hear a lot about Rona behaviors right now among kids and families, kids that are having a lot more tantrums, that are melting down a lot more. And I don't know about you guys, but I think that also applies to adults. Adults that may be more short-tempered or more easily frustrated and those kinds of behaviors. And if we just look at the behaviors itself without the context of where that child, family, or adult is coming from, we may misunderstand the behavior. And if we misunderstand it, then we're going to approach it in a totally different way. If somebody is zooming down the Bryan Boulevard and flying, you may automatically, when they pass you may think automatically, what a jerk, or throw them some explicatives or whatever, some finger gestures. But if you also then see them fly into the hospital parking lot, you may then understand their behavior from a different perspective. So trauma-informed approaches are largely about being willing to see multiple perspectives before action. So that requires us to pivot. And so right now, if any other time in our lifetime, at least, we've had to pivot pretty quickly with COVID. And so there's a lot that we can still do to pivot during this time for kids and families. Resiliency is a huge part of being trauma informed. And so if there's ever a time to look at how do we build resiliency, it's now. And that we can build resiliency despite the adversity that we're facing right now and that children face on a regular basis. And one of the ways we can do that is to connect and make sure that we're addressing it together, which is a point of this particular call. Also, to think about the language that we use. Language matters, particularly for kids and for all of us, I think. But we talk a lot about social distancing, and I am a proponent of the concept of that. But I think social distancing can be a misnomer when we think about that. In order to be resilient, we have to have both positive, supportive relationships and physical distancing as critical priorities, and that means figuring out how to connect, even if we can't physically be together. And so social distancing, yes, but what we're really talking about is physical distancing, but making sure that in that we're not removing supportive relationships, particularly because if we think about what kids need to be resilient, 20 years of research tells us that one of the biggest, strongest factors of resiliency among kids and families is if they have a positive connection with a caring adult over time. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. It could be a coach, it could be an officer, it could be a counselor, it could be a teacher, it could be a neighbor, a church member. But the research on resilience shows that consistent supportive relationship matters significantly in terms of how resilient a child can be in adverse circumstances. The other thing to keep in mind is that we have to be gentle with ourselves. We're trying to figure out how to make this work as we go. We don't have all the right answers. I don't think anybody in our country or our world knows exactly what to do at all times. It's a process we've never dealt with before. So we have to shift our expectations accordingly and understand that kids are also doing that too. If we talk about children's mental health, which is the focus of this presentation, children are trying to figure this out just as much as we are, but may not have the words to express it in the same way that we do as adults. So keeping that in mind and being more patient with our kids as well. And then, of course, equipping ourselves with science-driven tools that can help us know how to best help. So with that being said, I am going to pass the reins to Kristen Cheshire. Kristen is a licensed clinical mental health counselor at Kellin Foundation and also our team lead for the Treehouse Trauma Recovery Program. She's going to give us a brief snapshot of COVID's impact on kids and families and what we know at this time so that we have that information moving forward. Kristen?
All right. I'm ready.
Okie dokie. Sorry. Go for it.
All right, so I'm just going to briefly go over some of the impacts that we're seeing from COVID with our children and families. Something that's really glaring to us is the school closures and how that has really impacted our children and also our parents too, right? So with those schools no longer being that safety net for our children, we don't have the supports that they once had with the teachers and the counselors and the people, like Kelly said, those positive adult figures in their life. Also, some of the children rely on certain resources that the schools are given, such as their lunches and their breakfast. So we're seeing that as well as a big impact. Now parents are playing teacher as well as parents and working from home and wearing a lot of different hats, which can cause a lot of different sorts of issues in the home as well. So some of our children, there's a lot of information about how to stay well, how to not get sick. You know, we're all sanitizing like crazy, wearing masks, washing our hands, staying 6 feet apart. And our children might be a little bit nervous about that, especially if our younger ones who have more concrete thinking. So they may be worried that, you know, if their grandpa gets sick, that somehow they caused that. And so that can be really challenging for our little ones and for our older ones who are now trying to make sure that they're following all the rules. And going outside and seeing everybody in masks can be a little bit nerve-wracking for our children and for all of us. This is something that we have never experienced. So like Kelly said, we have to kind of figure out, how do we cope and how do we regulate? And so without having those activities and those things that our children are normally doing for an outlet, this can cause an increase in some of those problematic behaviors that those COVID behaviors, right? And so our kids might be getting frustrated more often. They might be having some emotional regulation issues. They don't have those same outlets they have had in the past. Parents are overwhelmed. They're maybe more short-tempered with their children because they're having to balance all these expectations. So our kids may be needing more attention, or they might be isolating. It just kind of depends on the kid. Some of our younger children may be more clingy than normal too, which can be sort of frustrating when you're trying to work from home and you have a 3-year-old on your hip all of a sudden all the time. So some of those things are issues that we're seeing. Something as providers and as parents that we need to be aware of too and to think about is our kids are online more than they ever have been. So that causes a lot of things when we're looking through a trauma lens. That can cause some difficulties in being able to always supervise our children on the internet. So making sure that our kids are being safe on the internet is going to become more and more important, those conversations with our parents and with our kids and teens, because we might find that they are being contacted and exploited. That could be something that we see more often as our kids are spending more of their time online. Okay, next slide, Kelly.
Okay.
So something else that we're seeing, especially in our community here, is an increase in domestic violence. And this is a really important statistic. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking, you guys. This is a really important statistic for us in our community, because we've seen 30% increase in calls related to domestic violence over the last month in Guilford County. And so why are we seeing this, right? So some of the factors that are leading to a greater risk are the isolation, everybody is in close quarters, everybody's at home. Some of the economic and financial stressors that we're dealing with, some people are able to work from home, some people have lost their jobs. So when we have families that are already sort of in a difficult situation and then they are not having that income, that can cause more tensions. And of course, we've seen an increase in substance use as well, which can be linked to domestic violence and child abuse. Something else that we've noticed about the lack of supports that our children are having. So again, going back to the school, they don't have their trusted adults outside of the home that they're used to having. And so they may not have as much support as they had before in making those reports to CPS or to other places and getting that, that care as soon as something happens. Okay, next slide. And so just briefly, a couple of other considerations is overall, our children and our families and all of us may be experiencing some overall grief reactions. Our world is completely different than we've ever known it to be before. So we're all losing something. That means our children are losing the way that they have been functioning and the way that they've known their world to be their entire life. And so losing those play dates, losing, not being able to say goodbye to their teachers at school, not being able to graduate with their class and walk across the stage, those are things that we can't minimize. Those are big, big impacts that we're seeing with our children that are, especially those who are having those big milestones that they can't really celebrate. So that's something for us to consider. And the anticipatory grief of how long is this going to last? We don't know when we're going to be, getting back to what life sort of used to look like, knowing that it's never going to be quite the same as it was. So we may be experiencing more of that as well. Also, just to touch on a couple of other things, these are completely, separate trainings that we could give, but we're going to see a lot of traumatic separation, a lot of traumatic grief from children who have actually lost their parents to COVID, or grandparents, or who have parents that are first responders, or who are nurses and doctors that are spending more and more time away from. And we're seeing that our minority populations are having more disparities than others. And so that's something really important that us as providers that we need to understand and explore as well. So, and that's all I got. I'll hand it back to Kelly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. Folks, feel free to continue to put questions in the chat box, and we'll organize those as we go. But definitely the COVID impact has kind of ripped back the Band-Aid of a lot of our societal issues that I think we really need to start. We've had needed, but really need to start paying more and more attention to, in terms of how we help kids, families, and communities be safe and well. And in the spirit of time, we're not going to go into significant depth in some of the national resources, but did just want to highlight a couple that folks can access. And all of the resources that we're sharing are available on our website to download. So just know that as we go through here, you can always go to our website at any time and download those. Starting with kind of our youngers, many of you may have seen that Sesame Street has a whole series out now on COVID talking about big feelings. They've also put out some videos that are specifically geared towards parents to help encourage parents during this time. Just last night, I saw that PBS put out a special edition on parenting during COVID, and encouraging parents to be gentle with themselves as they're trying to figure out what are the parenting strategies that I need during COVID. And so there's lots of different resources coming out. Sesame Street also has resources, not only for kids, for parents. They have books that you can access, printable resources. So I would encourage everyone to go to Sesame Street in Communities, and you'll be able to download lots of different printable resources at this time as well. As the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, otherwise known as NCTSN, that many of you might be familiar with. We are one of the 110-ish sites in the country that's an NCTSN site, and they have a huge warehouse clearinghouse of lots of different information. And so I pulled two in particular that I think would be particularly helpful for our kids and families. One is a handout that's free and producible as much as you want to share online or wherever, about helping children with traumatic separation or grief related to COVID. And it has some very concrete examples of language that can be used. So not only that it's important to help them, but what does that look like? And so just to highlight as an example, number 4 says, "I'm sad that I can't see my sick loved one in the hospital, and I worry they are alone." And so concrete ways that we can help is to assure that your loved one wants you to stay safe. So they don't want you to be near sick people, and just kind of some concrete language. And I don't know about you, but as a provider and also as a parent, having some examples of the kinds of language that could be used is helpful to kind of get a flavor to adopt some of these different strategies. The other handout that's listed here is a parent and caregiver guide to coping during COVID. And what we know, if children's mental health matters, children are part of family units. And that means that the family unit is also critical. And so we need to also make sure that we're taking care of our parents at this time as well. And so there's some concrete guidelines and suggestions for how parents and caregivers can help their families cope as well. These are also available in multiple languages. And again, they can be found either on the NCTSN website, or these ones can also be found directly on our website as well. And the NCTSN network as a whole has a bunch of different resources related to COVID. Here are some additional examples. So there's some fact sheets for parents. They have fact sheets that are COVID specific for youth, high school students, and college age students. They have fact sheets and guidelines for organizations and community leaders. They have fact sheets for school staff in terms of trauma-informed approaches to teaching and learning during COVID. So they really have a really wide depth and breadth of who they target in terms of sharing information. And all of these different segments obviously trickle down and directly impact the health and wellness of children and children's mental health. And so here's just a snapshot of a couple. And depending upon your role and what you're interested in, you can access any of these resources for free. And again, they're all on our website at this website here. Just wanted to pause for a second if there are any providers or clinicians in the house, in the virtual house. So many of you might be familiar with the UCLA PTSD Index. So that stands for the UCLA Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Index. It's a popular tool to assess trauma in service systems. So the NCTSN site has already revamped the UCLA tool specifically for COVID. So there's now a brief screening tool for COVID that allows for universal screening. And so you can see some of the questions here that are more geared towards COVID relationships. This is, I think, a helpful tool for those that are working a lot with kids and families. And I think relevant now, but what we know about trauma in kids is sometimes the impact of what's happening right now may not show up right now. It may show up 4, 5, 6 months from now. And that's important for us to keep in mind, is that even when restrictions are lifted and it looks like we're going back to kind of behaviors as usual as possible, that's oftentimes when we see the impacts of these types of events. So one takeaway point is to keep in mind that we may see the mental health impact right now among kids and families, but it's very possible that we'll continue to see those mental health impacts beyond when the pandemic resolves. Actually, I'm going to go back one second because also for our clinicians, I skipped over this slide. Just wanted to point out for any providers in the house that the APA, American Psychological Association, was already looking at adding a new grief disorder to the DSM, which is the diagnostic tool that was supposed to be released in 2021. And they're already looking at editing it and thinking about what does this look like for in the wake of COVID. And so they're starting to look at modifying some of the language. For example, we might see young children express learning or wanting to play with ladders climbing up to heaven to see loved ones. You might see different types of repetitive play and behaviors in children to kind of signify their loss. And so currently there are not strong indicators based on development of what a 3-year-old might do versus a 16-year-old in the DSM manual. And so the APA working group is working to make sure that those clarifications make it into the next edition, so that when we think about best approaching what a child and family needs, that we have the most thorough and developmentally appropriate understanding of their symptoms. So also just to mention, if you're interested in getting that COVID tool, because we are an NCTSN site in Guilford County, we have gotten approval to distribute that tool to our local provider partners. So if you'd like a copy of that tool, you can go to our website here and click on it, and you'll see the COVID tool. The only thing that the national office has asked us to do is to track who we've distributed it to. So that's why we're sending you to this website, so that you can just put your name in and then we'll email it to you. But that will allow us to kind of track how we're distributing that tool. All right. Again, children are embedded within families. So just a couple other national resources that are coming out here. The mobile apps COVID Coach is a mobile app that's specifically for adults, and it's talking about how do we maintain adult, parent, and caregiver mental health and wellness during COVID. It's a free app that can be downloaded for any adult, parent, or caregiver that can help guide you through some information and coping skills and self-care strategies. For those that are doing direct services, there's some national groups that are pushing for universal screening of suicidality, with suicide being the second leading cause of death among youth. That there's some push that we as helpers, for those that are doing direct services, begin screening regularly for suicidality. And this is one of the tools that's being pushed nationally, the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. And this is specifically pushed because it's relatively brief. It's 6 questions that are yes or no, just to kind of see where kids and young adults are in relation to suicidal thoughts. One of the, all of the resources that we've talked about so far, we have a section on our website, and our website is right here. If you go to kellinfoundation.org, COVID-19 resources, you'll see it. But on our website, we have clearinghouses of information based on all of these different topic areas. And so everything that we've talked about is on our website, and much, much, much more in terms of being able to access any of these free resources online. So continuing to go from national to local, since we're talking about children in particular, on that website, you'll see a bunch of apps that are available for children and teens. So we highlighted a couple of them here, some social emotional apps in terms of how to help kids regulate and how parents can help kids regulate. I've talked to several parents who are using these types of apps to wind down at bedtime as kind of a process for getting ready for rest. So wanted just to direct you to those as well in case that's of interest. We also know the need for connection for kids and families. It's a must for us as humans. And so one of the things that we're doing is virtual villages. And if you haven't heard of these before, this is a series of ways that families and kids of all ages can connect online to build resiliency, because we know that that connection is a key to children's mental health. So virtual villages is an ongoing series of support groups that help build resilience during this time. There are virtual villages for 0 to 5-year-olds, teens, high school graduates, college students that feel displaced, parents, caregivers, teachers. So we are excited to be able to continue to launch those. A full schedule and with dates and times of those virtual villages. All of them are free. Let me go back and say that. Everything, all of our virtual village opportunities are free. And the schedule of those virtual village sessions and villages themselves are available on our website as well. Many of you have seen this, but in terms of local resources, just want to make sure and share that the state of North Carolina has a hotline now that can be used for mental health needs. In particular, if there's any providers on the call, they're looking for volunteers to help staff this this hotline. You have to be a licensed provider, but if you're interested in being a part of this statewide hotline and volunteering your time here, you can go to the ncpsychology.org website that you see on the screen, and it'll give you the step-by-step for how to become a helper on the hotline. So continuing to move us on to our local resources, we've kind of set the stage for COVID and some of the national and local resources. We're going to continue towards that with our local resources panel. And this will be facilitated by Angela Sedlowski, who is our team lead for the Child Response Initiative. And then we will hear from each of our panelists, continue to share your questions, and after the panel, we'll go through and answer questions. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Sure.
So we are fortunate today. We have a group of really fantastic local leaders to help shed some light on what we're seeing in the community and resources, tips, tools to kind of help us support children and families. So I am just going to briefly introduce all of our speakers, and then we'll just jump right into it. So first we have Christina Singleton. She is the Associate Director of the Interactive Resource Center in Greensboro. Then we will have Tyra Clymer, the Director of Emergency Assistance with Greensboro Urban Ministry. Next up, we have Deputy Chief Sigmund with the Greensboro Police Department, followed by Lieutenant Ricketts, also with the Greensboro Police Department. And then we will have Mary Herbenick. She's the Director of Special Projects with Ready for School, Ready for Life, followed by Tiara Shackelford. She is with Family and Community Medical practice in the community. And we will wrap up with Ashley Bonner. She's the Regional Partnership Manager for Second Harvest Food Bank. So the questions more or less that the panelists will be addressing are what services are available at this time and how can we best connect children and families to these services? Where do you see gaps right now for children and families that could keep them from finding safety and wellness? And what resources would you recommend to help support families as well as to support one another and each other? So with that, I am going to pass the mic to Christina Singleton.
Hey everybody, it's so good to be on this call. Thank you for having me. I wanted to address, first of all, in talking about our services, so typically we are a day resource center for people experiencing homelessness. And also typically we only help adults. And so I think we can all agree that this is not a typical time. And as we're coming up with a plan and following the CDC guidelines on putting people in hotels to protect them, and especially the most vulnerable, we came up with a plan that we can also help families with children. I think all of us know that if you can't care for your children, then you can't care for yourself. So there just comes a point that we felt like we needed to expand that service. And so we have been putting people in hotels. We have 154 people right now, and that's individuals and families that we have in hotels. If the family is experiencing street homelessness, they can come here and we can do an intake assessment. And then as we do have times that we run out of hotel rooms, and so they may unfortunately have to be waitlisted, but we're doing everything we can to make that happen as quickly as possible, and then immediately referring to other organizations in Greensboro that are able to help with housing and getting those folks into more permanent housing as soon as possible. Should I go on to the second question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I think the second question was about gaps, right?
Yes.
Okay. So where we're seeing gaps, kind of what Kristen mentioned, is with domestic violence situations. We are seeing a substantial increase in that type of situation, and there's not nearly enough resources for all of the people that are coming in that situation. I think it does have a lot to do with the loss of stability and the quarantining and everything that you mentioned, isolation. So I would say that's one of our biggest challenges right now, even in the hotels. We're doing daily checks on them. We're taking 3 meals a day. And we're also partnering with CONE and congregational nurses so that people can get health screenings twice a week. So all of that is helpful, but it does create some challenges when it's families in one hotel room. It's a really small space. And I would say that that's what our biggest gap is right now. And as far as resources that we recommend for the domestic violence cases, of course, we highly recommend the Family Justice Center and work closely with them. And another resource that we have been able to partner with over the past month or so is GCS has done a really great job addressing the food instability. So luckily, if a family has already been living in a hotel and that's their registered address for Guilford County Schools, we are doing everything we can to let them stay in that hotel, even though we're only working with 2 hotels. So we want them to be able to stay there to create some stability if they've already been there for a few months. And we want them to be able to receive the food that in the area that they are and continue on with those. So if we do have to move them, GCS has been great in helping us make sure that all those kids are getting ample food, as that was one of our beginning challenges too. And of course, Kellin Foundation is always great for a great resource for people dealing with crisis, and so we're grateful to them as well.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was great. Moving along, we are going to pass it to Ms. Tyra Clymer with Greensboro Urban Ministry. So we will come back to Ms. Tyra, but we'll just move it right along to Deputy Chief Sigmund with the Greensboro Police Department.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I think we are in a very good place with the police department with resources because we are so fortunate to partner with some great agencies in Guilford County. In particular, one of the first ones I think of is the Child Response Initiative. We have very strong relationships. Each of our patrol divisions has a particular person that they can reach out to, and it has been such a valuable asset to us. So that we have the Child Response Initiative. We have 2 victim advocates that are assigned to our Criminal Investigations Division. So in the unfortunate instance, if a family or a child or adult is a victim of crime, we have an adult and a child victim advocate that are actually employed by Family Services of the Piedmont, which offers just runs a gamut of services that are available, mental health and otherwise. And those 2 programs are huge for us. And I'm also very proud of our officers that not just work patrol, but work our housing communities and our school resource officers when schools are in session, of course, because they refer kids away from the criminal justice system to so many outstanding programs that are available. And I'm just grateful that in our community, we have so many agencies that the police department can partner with that are really focused on our children and our families and supporting them. So I will just go straight into the next question. So for just some of the hindrances and the gaps, I think that access to services will always be a struggle that we continue to try to mitigate as best we can. It may be the time of day that services are available. It may be a job hindrance where parents and grandparents may not have the ability or may have struggles trying to get their family members or their children to the services to take advantage. And certainly we all understand the fear of being judged. If you or your family member reaches out for service, there's always going to be a fear in the back of your mind that somebody may judge you or somebody may make an assessment about you just because you're asking for help and may perceive it as a weakness. So that's a struggle that we all try to work through on that. And I would say the last thing for resources recommended, I would say certainly to continue to develop those partnerships, the ones I've mentioned and even the ones that I haven't mentioned because there's too many. But it's just the idea, continue to develop those resources, train our officers well on what's available in our community, and just really have that open line of communication between our employees and our CRIs, our employees and our victim advocates. And our SROs, while they're not in schools, they are actually out on the streets answering calls right now as well. But looking down the line and down the road as we go up to the fall, and the hopes that Guilford County schools will be able to open in some form or fashion again, our SROs have wonderful relationships with so many of our children, and that is an asset that I think we can't forget about. Mm-hmm. So I'm very appreciative from the police department to all our agencies that we partner with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chief Sigmund, and we're very grateful and fortunate to have Chief PD in our corner as well. Tyra, with Greensboro Urban Ministry, are you ready to do your thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kellin Foundation, for having us join you with this panel discussion. I, again, direct the Emergency Assistance Program, and since the COVID has come up for our community, my department we've actually increased the amount of funding that we are providing for housing, for utility assistance. We did receive some COVID funds through our community. And so we just encourage you, if people are in need of rental mortgage assistance, groceries, utility assistance, to please touch base with us. Let me move on to the questions. I did have some great input from Pathways, which is our family shelter directed by Steve Sandercock, and his staff provided some great input. And they are working very closely with Guilford County Schools. That is one of the resources that has been so supportive of both our transitional housing, which is Partnership Village, and Pathways. They have provided a school social worker, a school nurse. In addition, we have a social worker on staff at Pathways, and they've all been working together to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the children there at Pathways, as well as Partnership Village. They are providing, Guilford County Schools is providing breakfast and lunch for the children and families that are there. So we've been very, very appreciative of that. They do have a small food pantry there at Pathways, and they are getting the necessary supplies needed to keep the families going. Again, they're providing the case management, the Wi-Fi for the children, and their staff continues to talk to potential families to come into the shelter. Of course, we are abiding by the CDC guidelines as well. We did have to move families into shelter, move our individuals that are in our single shelter. We did move them out into hotels using some of the COVID funds and the funds we already had available here. We tried our best. We had in our shelter, we had over 100 men and 16 women. Plus, we had a few people staying in our lobby as we was deemed necessary for people who were out on who were homeless. So we're at this time, we started a process where we are starting intake again for our single shelter and for our family shelter. We've come up with plans, as the IRC stated, to try and get as many families off the streets as we can. We're constantly changing that plan as the environment changes, but we are anxious to get back to housing as many families as we can. Some of the gaps that we see that are needed, both staffs from Pathways and from Partnership Village. Partnership Village is our transitional housing where families can move. If they're homeless, they can move from their homelessness into our transitional housing. They have case management there that will work with them to get into some more permanent housing. But we've seen that be so successful because it has allowed families to stabilize and to get back up on their feet and then move into a traditional housing situation. Both those groups, our Pathways, wonderful staff at Pathways and Partnership Village, did state that some of the gaps that they were seeing were access to transportation and affordable transportation, safe childcare when parents are working. In regards to education, they said lack of access to internet for completing schoolwork. They see a loss of employment. There was always an issue with employment, but it has been heightened due to the COVID epidemic. they are working very hard. Both of those groups are working very hard to get the families that we have stabilized and those families who are calling in to help them get stabilized. The resources that they recommend, of course, is the Women's Resource Center, North Carolina Works, the Family Success Center, Goodwill, Wheels of Hope. You know, in our community, there are so many wonderful resources, and we have individuals that need services from all different types of agencies, and to connect as many as those resources are out there with the folks that we deal with. We are just very thankful for the support that we've gotten from Kellin, from the IRC, from the police department. We've just gotten a lot of support, and we are very thankful for that. Please call me if you need information about connecting with our organization. I will make sure that I connect you with the right person in our organization to assist you.
Thank you so much, Tyra. We really appreciate that. Next up, we will hear from Lieutenant Ricketts with the Greensboro Police Department.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hey, glad to be here. Chief Sigmund hit on a lot of things already with the police department. We're mostly, when it comes to children and getting them the tools that they need or the resources, we're mostly a referral service. However, some of the things that we do outside of referring, we work or partner with communities and schools. One of our captains here, Captain Martis, is a part on the board of directors for that, I believe, and she also works with that. We do lunch buddies. A lot of our officers, outside of, again, referral, we do lunch buddies when it was available before the COVID. We read to students in elementary schools. And we also have a program called Junior Achievements. It's more about a financial program that we partner with, or a lot of our officers or some of our officers partner with them and go into classrooms and teach this junior achievement class about financial responsibility. So outside of the CRI and Lisa Taylor, who's our RCI in District 2, who we love, they have been an excellent resource that we are able to refer our children to. And it works perfectly for our department because with the referrals and all the other partners that we have, our volunteer work. So we're kind of full-fledged and for some years now have been involved in partnering and working and volunteering. We're starting to hire more officers that are more community oriented, believe in partnering and believing in volunteering to help the community. So that's one of the things that's answer to number one. Number two, the gaps, and I guess I can put 2 and 3 together. One of the founders of one of our criminal justice theories that we used in criminal justice when you go into school and college, George Kellin, he said before he passed away a few years ago that we need a social worker. And I know Lisa refers a lot of our clients that we have that we go out and see, and children need help. I would say the future holds that where the gap is in policing nationwide is that we need more social workers attached to our police departments, because a lot of the problems that we have outside of crime right now, our main focus is fighting violent crime in our communities, but a lot of people need, outside of mental health and things like that, they need other resources right now. And by the time I refer them to Lisa, and then Lisa gets back to them, which she does right away, as soon as possible. So it's not anyone's fault. It's that we need a social worker to be there in the gap to immediately make sure, follow up, and make sure these children, adults as well, the parents of these children get the resources that they need, or make them take the resources that they need to make sure that their children are healthy and happy and are able to thrive. I know a lot of our crime in the recent 3 months before COVID were committed by teenagers, 12 to 15. So we need social workers that are in the gap to help us combat a lot of the problems. You know, a lot of things they were stealing and robbing to get money. You know, who knows what their homes were like. And so I think if we can work something where we would have social workers, but I don't know if the community wants to pay for it, attached to every police department, every district, to kind of help, cut class when the kids are cutting class and things of that nature, that we can get them the resources and we have someone that knows the system that can mitigate and get the kids help quicker than we can right now with our referral services, which they are doing an excellent job. It's just that something that's the future for policing, I believe, is attaching more social workers and things of that nature to our departments to help with fighting crime, these domestic violence issues, and so on and so forth.
Thank you so
Any
much.
question for me?
I'm sure there are, and we're going to come back for Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions for Lieutenant Ricketts or for any of our other panelists, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them. But thank you so much. And Mary, with Ready for School, Ready for Life, take it away if you're ready. We will come back to Mary as well. Tiara, are you ready? Tiara Shackelford.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tiara Shackelford. Thank you all for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I am a family nurse practitioner within the community, but I am also working in a student health center on the campus of a university. So I can kind of speak to both community health as well as what our young adults need at this time. Just to speak to some of the resources, in addition to what was spoken about earlier, there are free and reduced meals for children. There's a number that you can text. It's Food NC to 877-877, and they'll send you a list of sites that are serving meals throughout the day. There's also childcare resources for essential providers. I know we spoke about those who are on the front line and having children at home, and sometimes it's hard and challenging for them to find childcare, so that is that service as well. There's also ways to talk about COVID to children and how to help them cope during this time, as well as activities for children and educational resources as well. And all of those can be found on guilfordchildren.org. I know someone spoke about employment opportunities, and that's up there as well. I know one of the big things that we found with our young adults is the transition from high school, having their high school year disrupted and missing out on some monumental moments, prom, senior year graduation, and then not knowing what their first year of college or the first few years of college is going to look like. So just dealing with that stress and anxiety has been very challenging for these students, as well as students who have already been here on campus and they have been displaced. A lot of students, this was actually their getaway from bad situations at home. And so being on campus has been ideal for them. So for them to have to go back home and not knowing what it's going to look like in the near future has been extremely stressful. So some of the gaps and barriers that we found is the distance between the students and our providers, and them not being able to have that health care, because a lot of the times we found that they actually feel more comfortable with providers here on campus than their family care physician at home, because now mom and dad is with them and they don't feel as comfortable enough to open up. So the way we have been working on bridging that gap is actually, we recently incorporated telemedicine here. So we are open and accessible for them to reach out and make appointments, and we can schedule medications. We have a psychiatric nurse practitioner as well as a psychiatrist on board as well. They make contacts with the students. They've also found an exacerbation in stress, anxiety, depression during this time. So they make it their duty to reach out and make contact with these students. We also have virtual counseling, so that has been extremely helpful during this time as well. And I think the last question, if I'm not mistaken, was the resources. What we recommend to support families, aside from the ones that I mentioned before, which can be found on guilfordchildren.org, is just being there for young adults. Young adults during this time, they have been charged with the duty of also taking care of their younger siblings and, you know, making their meals and doing their activities while mom and dad are at work. And so that has also been a stressor. So just being there for our young adults, making sure that we are checking on their mental health to make sure that they're in a safe space. Right now, the UNC system has allowed, or they've given us the okay to actually push back the enrollment in the fall. So it is going to be a later start date. However, that can change every day as COVID cases roll in. But it is going to be a later start date in the fall, and they are not going to have a fall break, but they are going to leave for Thanksgiving break, and instead of coming back, they're just going to return for the spring semester. And that will cut down on just the transmission and the during that travel time of going home, coming back, going home, and coming back. So those are some of the resources that we've kind of implemented to help support our young adults and children at this time.
Thank you so much, Tiara. We really appreciate it. Thank you for addressing the young adult population. So we will now go to Mary with Ready for School, Ready for Life. Mary?
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
No one ever hears that on Zoom calls anymore, right? It's great to see all of you, and this has been such an incredible opportunity. Thanks to Kellin Foundation for bringing us all together. I've learned a lot during this call. I work for Ready for School, Ready for Life. We are not a direct service provider. We are a backbone organization focused on building an early care and education system, starting with pregnancy and moving up to age 5. So when you think about when COVID hit and there was a school system to make lots of decisions about how things were going to operate, and nothing like that exists in the earlier years. And it's really important. So we're working with about 100 agencies and organizations across Guilford County to actually build a system of care so that young children and their families are supported every step along the way in a really systematic way, so that we don't have families with young children falling through the cracks. So with that system work, we do a lot of work with partners in medical settings at this point in time, because that's where families with young children show up. All of those partners shifted to telehealth. And so these are nurse home visitors. These are folks who are in pediatric practices to help answer questions, provide parent education, that type of thing, and to really destigmatize parenting education along the way. So when COVID-19 hit, we again did a lot of shifting. And one of the things that we learned from the agencies and organizations, we had a long-term goal of building an agency finder that will be really helpful to help families with young children navigate the system. And we hastened that process, and we'll be releasing tomorrow a COVID-19 resource tool that will be available to all agencies and organizations. Right now, there are 234 programs represented in this tool, and it gives the latest, greatest, most updated information. First of all, as things were closing, right, and hours were changing and resources were changing on a minute-by-minute basis, this is meant to keep up with that. And so I would be happy to share that resource with the Kellin Foundation tomorrow to share with everybody on this call. And I'll put my email address in the chat as well. So that's one thing that our internal team has been working on, because there are just so many missed connections, especially with family with young children. And I especially appreciated the comments before about so many older children are taking care of their young siblings right now. And that is a challenge in the best of circumstances. We do know from brain science, 80% of brain development happens by age 3. That's a lot. So the trajectory that's being set with our young children now, or what's happening with our young children now, will play out because it builds the foundation for the rest of their lives. And so buffering their brains during this intensive time of growth and development as neural connections are being developed and building attachments. We've heard from families across the board about how difficult that is as they're trying to work and don't have the resources of family or childcare anymore at their disposal. So there are some gaps. We've been hearing lots of gaps. We have a community alignment specialist who takes calls from lots of different agencies and organizations and providers. And the ones that we're hearing most right now are gaps around childcare, about who is taking care of children. And we know that about 50% of the spots of the centers have closed down in Guilford County. And so there's a lot of anxiety about how the opening up will happen, both for providers and for the families whose children are in their care. And so we're keeping a close eye on that. So childcare providers are in this precarious position right now of having to choose to serve their families and the families that they serve, and potentially putting themselves at risk. They are definitely essential workers that have kind of gotten forgotten during COVID-19. We're also hearing a lot about needs like housing. I mean, the typical things that we hear, transportation. We are also hearing a huge need for diapers, right? What happens when you can't diaper your child properly? And there are all kinds of health implications. So we're working right now with the Diaper Network and a few other partner agencies and organizations to figure out how we can build a systemic approach instead of an individual organization approach to solving these issues. There are a couple, you've all talked about so many fantastic resources, and I just want to highlight a couple others. The Guilford Basics is 5 easy, free, fun things that families can do with their children, 0 to 3, to really build brains, build their brains in growth and development. And so the website is, it's guilfordbasics.org, and there are videos and there are all kinds of examples about how you can do that. My favorite right now that I'm also using with my teenagers is Maximize Love, Manage Stress. And so by buffering the parents and families, we're also buffering children. Also, I mentioned child development specialists that are in the pediatric practices. They are available. They have made themselves available through Children's Home Society to do consultations with families who have children up to age 3. And so Dr. Sabrina Cook-Davis at Children's Home Society is a contact for that. I'll also add her email and phone number into the chat. And then finally, UNC Greensboro's Bringing Out the Best program is focused on social emotional development of children birth to 5. And they are also offering free consultations for families by phone, so that if there's a frustrated parent, that they will have someone to talk to. And that's just another great resource. And we'll also share the link with that too. I think that's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was wonderful. And our final few minutes here with our panelists, we're going to pass it to Ashley Bonner to talk to us about Second Harvest and the important topic of food. So Ashley, if you are ready, please take it away. Can you hear us, Ashley?
I think you're muted.
Oh,
she's
there you
muted.
go. Can you unmute?
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
You mean?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Perfect.
So again, thank you guys for having me on the call today. I am with Second Harvest Food Bank, and I'm a regional partnership manager. So over the 18 counties that we serve, I am over 2, which are Guilford and Randolph. What we have seen, of course, which I'm sure everyone else has seen, is a huge rise in numbers. Even prior to COVID-19, children were, of course, the highest number of people that we were serving, children and seniors. And with COVID-19, those numbers have, of course, increased. as of late. One thing that we've been doing, of course, is really being there with our partners on the ground, trying to help them as those numbers increase and as help them grow their capacity. I've been a part of a really great group through the Weaver Foundation and Emily McCullum. So I'm on a call weekly with different county school systems, Cone Health, United Way, Greensboro, High Point, to kind of look at all the resources specifically to children. One of the things I think are really good right now are the grab and go sites that the schools have been able to start. One of our programs, Backpack Beginnings, is doing a really great job. They've actually doubled the amount of bags that they're currently getting out to the schools weekly, and they've seen a really good reaction to that. They've been able to get items for different programs, like they've been able to give out soap. They've been able to give out books to the kids at the site as well. So that's been really cool to witness and see how excited the kids are to receive their items along with the food that they're receiving. Through Jamila Pender, who was with Cone Health, I was able to connect her with Chef Jeff Bacon of our Providence program, which, if you're not familiar with that, is a culinary program that we have at the food bank, where we have people who may be unemployed, underemployed, have a past, and just have a love for cooking. So we have a culinary school, and through that we do community meal sites. So we do breakfast, lunch, or dinners, depending on what the sites want. And with the Jamila Pender, she was able to connect with our Providence program, and they've now started 2 community meal sites in Greensboro. And I have the information for you guys. They're on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 different sites. They're doing that now, and they want to add a few more on, but they're just trying to see how this goes. And they opted to do dinner sites instead of a breakfast or dinner site, because if you guys probably are familiar with, a lot of different programs are already doing breakfast and or lunch. So they opted to do dinner to kind of meet that need for those in Guilford County. So the locations are Mount Olivet, AME Zion, and again, it's Tuesday and Thursday. It's 5 to 6 at that location. There's Bethany Fellowship Church, again, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5:30 to 6:30. And there's also Renaissance Shopping Center, which is 5:30 to 6:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. 1 meal per child that comes. The child does not have to be present with the parent and or guardian that comes to pick up the food. And there's also no paperwork or ID required to get the food for the child or the children. As far as gaps I've seen, kind of echoing what Deputy Sigmund said as far as the stigma associated with going to different locations. I think that is still kind of present. It's always been as having food pantries, people kind of have troubles, which I think we can all understand with going to somewhere and asking for help. So I think that is also an issue, as well as transportation and location. A lot of people are still working. They may need these resources for their children, so they're not able to go to the grab and go sites for breakfast and or lunch, and they're not able to even get there at sometimes to get the food to take back. So I think those are 3 of the most significant gaps that I've seen in our county. And then as far as resources, I think that the Guilford County School System website is a great resource for anyone looking for meals for their children. They have all of the grab and go sites up there, as well as the community meal sites that I just told you guys about through Cone Health and our Providence Kitchen. Our website as well is a great resource for you if you need to direct people to pantries. All of our counties are listed on there, all 18. People also are not necessarily, required to go to a pantry in Guilford if they live a little bit closer to Winston-Salem or anything like that. They can go to other pantries to access food. And then also on our website is our Cooking Matters program. And so they are having to work remotely right now due to COVID-19. But on their website, they have really great resources. You have meals to cook with your children that are really simple, where they can actually get involved and help you prepare the meals. There's things on there to help with exercising, which I know a lot of us are just kind of eating and binging and sitting on the couch when we're not working. But we also want to stay mindful of being active and getting out there and doing things right in your living room with your children. So that's also a great resource on our website as well. So again, thank you guys for asking me to be here. It's been really informative, and that's all.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you to all of our panelists. We appreciate you taking the time to share that important information and resources. And Kelly.
All right, so we will go ahead and just give you a couple final resources. We know there's a lot of information. And so we'll make sure to distribute a follow-up to everyone with all of the recommendations and resources in the chat box as well. A couple other things that are happening moving forward. Remember that perspective we were talking about early on, the duck, the rabbit, all of those things. And so one of my favorite quotes from Fred Rogers was, look for the helpers. You always find people that are helping. And so we're trying to build that resiliency by doing a Rays of Hope community art showcase for kids, and asking kids and teens to send us pictures or drawings or poems or whatever medium is speaks to them about where they're seeing hope and love right now. And so we're going to display these virtually through our social media channels. And then when we're able to kind of open back up and be on site, we plan to do a community art exhibit to highlight where kids and families right now are seeing hope and love. So if you are working with kids, have a kid that might want to put in a submission, feel free to do so, and we'll send this out in the follow-up notes as well. So what else is next? Just to kind of give you a couple ways that we're continuing to grow moving forward. Since 2008, the Kellin Foundation has run a group called the Guilford County Trauma Provider Network, which is a group of individuals and agencies that address the needs of children and families who have experienced trauma. Members of the Trauma Provider Network have included law enforcement, victim advocates, mental health providers, school personnel, child protective services, parents, caregivers, caseworkers, religious and community leaders, business representatives, etc. Together, this network has provided a coordinated behavioral health response specifically to build resiliency in our community for more than a decade now. And each month, the network has met to coordinate care for our community and discuss new programs or changes, resources on a regular basis so that we can collaborate and make a bigger impact together than we can separately. So to better reflect our focus on resiliency, we're updating our name to really kind of highlight the fact that we're working more on resiliency. And so we are updating our name to be Resilient Guilford. And our action being, our mission being an action-oriented trauma resiliency network that builds and supports safe, secure, and nurturing communities. And so this is our little tagline, RU4RG. So this is an open community meeting that anyone is welcome to attend. We typically meet the first Wednesday of every month, and we'll continue to meet virtually until further notice, until it's safe to kind of gather again. But in terms of what's next, you are welcome to mark your calendar to join us on June the 3rd from 12 to 1. And our topic will be summertime. And I won't sing. I'll keep you from having to hear my tunes. But the topic will be around summer safety and camp activity options, particularly when so much is changing and camps are closing. And so we'll be focusing on how do we create good activities and access good activities for kids and families during this summer. All right, so we are going to spend the last 12 minutes or so doing reviewing any questions that we have that came in from the chat box. And so Lisa Taylor is going to be facilitating our Q&A discussion. So Lisa, you want to give us a rundown of the questions that have come through?
Yes, thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and just run through this as quickly as we can, but we want to make sure that if anybody did have a question, that the panelists would be able to answer that. So I'm going to start from the top. And basically, the first question, I believe that's going to be more so for Tyra, but if in fact someone else feels like they can answer this, but it looks like it would be more for you, Tyra. It says, for the Kids in Pathways and Partnership Village, are they receiving any programming, activities during this time at all? Virtually, of course. And if that is the case, do you have a need for anything? Does the panel or any of the agencies have a need for any type of personal protective gear, things like that, something that you all would need help with, that maybe even us as a community could come together and try to help you?
I would suggest, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I would suggest that anyone who has questions directly for Pathways get in contact with Steve Sandercock, who is the director, and he can provide you information on what's needed there. I'm sure he welcomes any resources that anyone can provide. I did include his number on the chat, in the chat box.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for that, Tara. And how about when it comes to the protective gear? Is that the same thing? Connect with him for that as
Yes,
well?
please.
Okay, all right, no problem at all. Okay, also now let's just see who we're going to have to answer this question. If in fact, well, this is kind of going back there again because we're talking about being able to connect with the officers. So I think I'm going to make this be for you, Chief Sigmund. I want to ask a question first. How do you all protect yourselves, and how hard has it been or easy for you all to make sure that all of your officers are staying well and safe going out into the community and coming, you know, if you will, just straight on with the people? How's that working for you all?
Well, I think just like for anyone, but especially any first responders or medical providers in hospitals, for example, or any doctor's offices, it's a challenge because we still want to appear approachable. And sometimes when you put on a mask or you put on other PPE attire, it can be interpreted differently. But we've certainly stayed very close to all the CDC guidelines and constantly checking those because, as we all know, they're updated on a regular basis. And doing our best to provide PPE attire, provide guidance to our employees about when you need to wear them, what an exposure is, you know, and how to still interact with the public in a very sensitive and open manner, and not allow this pandemic to you know, fear for us personally, for as a community, for us all to get through it together. It's a challenging time for all of us, and everyone's concerned about each other's health and safety and well-being, and just still accomplish our goals, still accomplish our mission at the police department, still keep Greensboro a safe city for all of us to live in, but do it in a manner that we can all stay very healthy and we can protect each other and take care of each other. So it is a challenge that we take on every day.
Thank you so much for that. And of course, we want to say thank you to all the first responders, but we also want to say, how can we help you? Is there anything that we can do that, you know, for support for GPD? We want to make sure that we're there for you as a community as well.
Well, I would say that the community has really rallied around us. In the past few months, we have had so many offers of everything from food to other protective gear. And I would say anyone that wants to make any offer or ask how they could help, or even as one of the questions on the chat room a few moments ago is how can folks that might be working normally with summer camps and other programs, how can they offer their services to the police department? I would say give Jenny Cavanis a call. She's our Director of Community Engagement, and her phone number is 336-373-2636. 373-2636. And Jenny has an ability where she can coordinate so many things, and she on a daily basis knows what our needs are and is in tune with the community to figure out how we can work together to address community needs as well. So we thank you for all the support. It has been refreshing and overwhelming, and we thank you.
Thank you so very much. And I'm so glad that you answered that, because I know Tara Sandercock had a question for Lieutenant Ricketts, and I believe that summed that up. Is that correct, Tara? Do you feel okay? She got thumbs up on that. We just want to make sure that if you have questions that we are answering them properly. So thank you again, Chief. We do appreciate that. And let's see if we got any more questions.
Miss Lisa, this is Tara.
Yes.
If we can help with Jenny, Chief and Lieutenant, in helping bring together any of the folks involved in summer programming and you know, just to help convene that group, just let us know. At the Community Foundation, we're happy to help support, but I will reach out to Jenny and talk about what the possibilities might be. So we appreciate you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so, so much. And then also we have Sharon Rothenberg, if I'm saying that correctly. She had a question. She's saying, hello, all this has been a boatload of information and resources. It's just amazing. So we thank you for that. She's an elementary ed teacher with GCS. And she chose to participate in the webinar because her concern is how the schools are going to get all of these experts and resources into the schools and intervene where and when needed. How is that going to happen? So I think, Mary, I'm going to give that to you. What do you think about that? Mary? Oh, okay.
Before Mary speaks, I just unmuted myself. Can I just comment vocally, if that's okay? And I won't be long. But thank you for taking that message out of my chat box. And that's not to say that schools, you know, we have a nurse, we have a guidance counselor, we have a social worker. Bear in mind too that, well, the social worker is full-time. You know, a nurse is in the building 2 days a week. The social worker is shared between 2 schools. When school resumes in August, I mean, we can't imagine what it's going to look like, but then the other side of your brain says, this is what it could look like. And I just, you know, we meaning co-workers and I are thinking about how best we can have the people, all these wonderful resources out there, come in and support us even with our kids. Now I'll stop talking. Thank you for listening.
Yes, of course, of course. And I didn't know if Mary Herbernick wanted to make a comment at all. You're muted right now, Mary. Did you want to unmute?
Yep, I'll go ahead and unmute. And I want to say we focus, Ready for School, I feel like focus is really age 5 and under, but we work really closely with the school system. And I think there are a couple of different avenues, and this question is coming up all over the place about how we're going to support children, especially they're coming in, you know, 6 months to a year behind now from missing school this year, along with all of what they've been experiencing from being isolated during this time. So there are a couple of ways we can bring that up. One of them is through Say Yes Guilford Support Services Group, who is continuing to do work during this time. I'm actually on a call with them later today, and I'd be happy to raise this. And then also with Dr. Wanda LeGrand at Guilford County Schools, who is responsible for thinking through this work, and Dr. Whitney Oakley on the academic side, who's the chief academic officer.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for that. And just, you know, something obviously that teachers are going to be thinking about the whole summer. I mean, we'll take our summer break, but this will be over our heads as it will be for everybody else going forward. But thank you for taking the time. And now I'll mute myself back on so I don't talk. Thank you again.
And if I could just jump in and make one additional comment on that there. So actually probably later today, the Kellin Foundation and Guilford County Schools has partnered to offer a series of virtual villages specifically for teachers. So in June, there'll be a 6-part series that's open to teachers that's specifically focusing on trauma-informed teaching and learning strategies during COVID and some concrete tips and tools and resources. And so that will be open to all teachers. And then there'll be a subsequent parent series as well that's getting ready to be blasted out to all parents connected into Guilford County Schools to kind of do the same, but from a parenting perspective and a kind of what should you look for in your kids and how to best support kids during this time.
Right.
And those villages are meant to be reactive in the sense of the first couple are going to be relatively scripted, but then we're really going to hear from the teachers about what they say that they need. And so as the series goes on, it will be specifically tailored to what the teachers are telling us that they need information on to try to be as helpful as possible before teachers go on their breaks.
Sure. And the one other thing that I just wanted to mention, and then I promise I'll stop, is, you know, the big buzzword now is SEL, social and emotional learning. And that was sort of always there, but now with COVID, it's like, you know, it's social emotional learning in, you know, you know, giant capital letters. It's more than just the buzzword. It's going to be the #1 priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before reading and math. So there you go. But thank you for addressing that.
Absolutely. And I know we're running short on time, so I think we have a couple additional questions that we'll send out the responses to, so you have them with all of these resources and all of the helpful information that was shared today. And thank you, Lisa, for facilitating our Q&A. Just wanted to kind of close out by saying, please join us if you can for our June 3rd meeting from 12 to 1. Email us. And we can add you to that listserv if you'd like to be added. And just thank you all to the panelists that participated today and for taking the time today to share your resources and information with us, and of course all of the participants. And since we're looking at summertime, I just wanted to highlight here that if anybody's looking for a little pick-me-up, last summer, the summer before that, GPD did a little lip sync video about summertime. So feel free to check that video out. I don't think it'll play live through this mechanism, but we will be playing it in the June event. So please join us for that. And thank you again. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is below. Have a great day. And thank you for celebrating children and working to help address children's mental health, because it certainly matters. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.